Hello, this is my second game of 2013. In my first game, I played someone called David Wood, who was a 22, and I managed to win that as blacks. In this game, I am playing someone called Nasrullah Sheikh, who is a 1-4-4. I myself am a 1-2-5. I played d4. He played knight f6, e3, d5, bishop d3, e6. So this is the typical collie system. f4, transposing into the stonewall system. Knight e4, knight f3, knight d7. So this is the typical stonewall line where the knight sits in e4 and blocks the bishop's attack onto h7. It's very useful for blacks because if they don't do this, then after knight d2, black won't have that chance again. But as the knight is on e4, then if white does play knight d2, then black can always play f5, and bishop takes e4 is met by d takes e4, followed by f5 possibly. So this is very useful also because if bishop takes e4, then black will have the bishop pair. So castle short, c5, c3, c4. This is normally a mistake, because what happens now is that this pawn is overstretched, and after bishop c2, knight d2, then there is always the possibility of knight takes and then knight t5 attacking this pawn, and also the pawn on c5 becomes weak. If you're going to play c4, you have to follow it up with b5, a5 and b4, otherwise white is going to get a very quick and decisive attack on the king side. So bishop c2, knight df6, knight bd2, bishop e7, knight e5, h5. This was quite interesting because it means that black is not going to castle. So white should now focus all his attention into busting open the center with a move like f4, f5. Also, he should be careful to stop a g5 advance. So if he does play f5, then there is always g6 and then g5. He has to be careful because there is going to be the h4, h3, and he wants to always be able to play g3 so that he doesn't have to open his position. So knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop a4, check. This is a neat trick to know, because now it forces the king onto f8, and now what we realize is that the rook and the queen are unconnected. So if this stays the way it is, white is going to have a definite advantage and should be able to win. So always look out for this tactic, whether you are blacks or whether you are whites, as it can be very annoying. Bishop returns to c2, now threatening bishop takes e4, d takes, and then knight takes pawn. Queen c7, queen f3, knight f6. So the knight has now retreated, and this is looking okay for white. e4. So this is characteristic of the stonewall and collie system, because at some time you have to play e4, because this not only releases your bishops, but it gives them good squares to attack. For example, the b7 pawn, the king side, and it also will support the f5 square in this variation. So he played b6, looking for bishop b7, and then he will have a lot of focus onto this e4 square and will be able to win a pawn there. So e takes d5 is almost forced, bishop b7 and f5. So you can see that white are trying to rip open the center, and he has been allowed to do this by black's move of bishop b7. Bishop takes d5, queen f4, so the queen is advancing, and now there is always this disclosed attack. Bishop d6, f takes e6, bishop takes e6. And I think we can all agree here that whites definitely have the advantage, because the king is exposed. There are only two pieces between the king and the queen and the king. The bishop is looking menacing over here, because it can come in onto g3 and create some problems. Black does have this queen bishop attack onto the knight, but he can never take the knight, because if he does, then the pawn takes and this knight will have to move. So I would say white has a slight advantage here, and if he can get all of his pieces into this attack, he should be able to win. Bishop f5. So he's trying to remove one defender, because he's saying that if we take away these bishops, then I will have better chances in the attack. So he takes, queen takes. And now this knight is no longer pinned, so this knight has a job. Bishop takes e5, d takes e5, and white now has an even bigger advantage, because he has a pawn, queen, rook, all attacking at black's king, while black only has a queen and possibly a knight. White should also be able to get their bishop into the game and deploy their a rook down the d file. So knight g4. I'm not sure if this is better than knight h7. It's definitely better than knight d7, because that would block the queen. If he had played knight h7, well, both ways white should be able to play e6. However, this way, if white does play e6, there is the queen takes h2. So this is better than knight h7 or knight g8. h3, kicking the knight away, and black plays knight takes e5. However, now bishop f4 check. Well, not check, but pins the knight to the queen. Queen check, king h1, and rook e8. So it's starting to get tense in the center here. Bishop takes e5, and white has won a piece. f6, bishop g3, and queen takes f5. Rook takes f5, rook e2, and rook f2, trading the rooks. Black declines the trade and plays rook e4. Rook d1, and white has an open file. Unfortunately for black, he is technically behind by a rook and a bishop, because his h8 rook is not in this game, and it will take him about 2 moves to get it in the game, and in that time white would have hoped to have started another attack or have won a couple of pawns with his extra pieces. So king f7, getting his rook into the game. Rook d7 check, king g6, and rook takes a7. Rook he8, rook f1, h4, bishop f2, rook e2, b3, c takes b3, a takes b3. So white has managed to swap off another pair of pawns. So he has the pawn majority on the queen side, black has a pawn majority on the king side, but white has an extra bishop, and he will be winning this b6 pawn very shortly. Rook b2, b4, rook e2, attacking the bishop. Bishop takes b6, rook takes g2, rook g1, rook takes g1, king takes g1, rook c2, and rook c7. King f5, rook takes g7, rook takes c3, rook g4, rook takes h3. Rook g4 was definitely a mistake by white. He should have played king h2, where he could have then blocked in a check with rook to g2. Also, after king h2, he could have played bishop to c5, and he would have definitely had the dominated position. But he made this blunder. Rook takes, rook c4, king g6, bishop f2, rook b3, rook takes h4. So all in all, white has managed to get his pawn back, and now he is just a clear bishop up. King g5, rook c4, f5, king g2, f4, rook c5 check, king g4, b5, fd check, king f1, rook b1, bishop e1, king f4, rook c4 check. So white is making a bit of a meal out of this, Black has been playing quite accurately, in fact. King e3, and now white makes a serious mistake. He plays rook c3. If he had played rook to b4, then he could have traded the rooks, possibly. If black had declined it, then he could have just pushed the pawn, and if black plays f2, then he could just play rook to c3 check. King has to move up, and then the king can just take the pawn. But he missed it and played rook c3. This was the result of time pressure, which was a bit unfortunate for me. So king e4, king f2, and now the pawn goes. So white had the win, missed it, and then lost his final pawn in time pressure. Rook takes f3, rook b2, king g3, rook b7, rook f4 check, king d3, and bishop f2. And now a draw is accepted, obviously, because this isn't going to get anywhere. White was trying to force black to lose on time, because black had only about 14 seconds left, but in the end decided not to because it wasn't really fair. Thanks for watching, and my next game will be against David McNish, who was a very strong player. Thanks for watching, and bye.